Let's take a look at some of the structures that you can see on the surface of the brain. So all this area of the brain where we've got these bumps and grooves, this is called the cerebrum. So all this upper part of the brain with the gyri and sulci, this is the cerebrum. And then if you look at the back of the brain, this brown structure that you can see down here, that's the cerebellum. So when we study physiology of brain, we're going to talk about the functions of the cerebrum, all of this, and the functions of the cerebellum, that area that's at the back of the brain. Now let's look at some of the structures that are on the surface here that we can see when we're looking from the top down, just looking at our brain and looking at the structures. So can you see that the brain is organized into these ridges, and then there are grooves. So a shallow groove is called a sulcus, and a deep groove is called a fissure. So can you see how there's a really deep groove here that divides the brain into right and left sides? This is called the longitudinal fissure. The longitudinal fissure. And it's this kind of divider between the left and right sides of the brain. So like I said, these bumps are called gyrus. So any bump here will be a gyrus, and then a shallow groove is called a sulcus. So there are many gyri, which is the plural of gyrus, and many sulci, which is the plural of sulcus, on the surface of the cerebrum. Now, if you look inside the brain, and here's a brain that I've taken out of the model, or actually it doesn't show it very well, so let me just open this one up. So if you look inside the cerebrum here, you can see that there's actually some color coding off the brain model. So you can see that the inner portion here is colored white, and then the outer portion is colored this pinkish color. So these have names. The white matter is this internal part of the brain, and this gray matter is the external part of the brain. So white matter is myelinated parts of neurons. So your white matter is your myelinated parts of your neurons, and then your gray matter is your unmyelinated parts of your neuron. So your cell bodies and your dendrites are going to be in the gray matter, which is on the surface, and then the myelinated axons of your neurons are going to be deeper inside your brain. So you may have heard gray matter and white matter before. It's talking about whether that part of the brain is myelinated or not. So this outer surface of the brain where you find the gray matter is called the cerebral cortex. Now I have to see if I can get this to fit back together so we can continue talking about some of these brain structures. So we get the idea that the gray matter is unmyelinated parts of neurons, that's more superficial. The white matter is myelinated parts of neurons, that's deeper inside the brain. Now the brain is divided into many different lobes, and the names of the lobes correspond with the names of the bones that are around the brain parts of the skull. So this is the anterior side of the brain, and this is the posterior side of the brain. So remember, your forehead will be right here. So remember, the bone that's in the front of your skull is called the frontal bone. So this lobe right here at the front of the brain will be called the frontal lobe. Then remember, we had two bones here, the parietal bones. So these lobes of the brain are called the parietal, or we had the parietal bone, so these are the parietal lobes. And then back here, the back of the skull, remember that was called occipital. So we have occipital lobes of the brain. And then if you look on the side, where your ear would be right here, there's a temporal lobe of the brain, just like there was a temporal bone there. So the names of the lobes match the names of the bone. So how do you know where one lobe ends and another begins? There are grooves there called sulcus that separate the two. So usually right here in the middle of the brain, there is a deeper sulcus called the central sulcus. So somewhere about here, there will be a central sulcus, and that will separate your frontal lobe from your parietal lobe. Likewise, on the side of the brain, the frontal and parietal lobes are separated from the temporal lobe by the lateral sulcus here, and then the parietal lobes are separated from the occipital lobes by a parieto-occipital sulcus. So there are sulcus, these shallow grooves, which separate the lobes. So we've got frontal lobe, occipital lobe, parietal lobe, and then the temporal lobes will be on the sides, just like the exact same places where the bones of the skull were, with those same names. So I mentioned that there was a central sulcus here, a deep groove that separates your frontal lobe from your parietal lobe. And unfortunately, it's not marked on our models, but this is one of the most important parts of the brain right here. So where your central sulcus is, the bump right in front of that is called the precentral gyrus, and the bump right behind that is called the postcentral gyrus. And these two gyri, the precentral gyrus is involved with motor movement, and the postcentral gyrus is involved with sensation. So this is one of the most important parts of your brain where the movement originates and where sensation data is delivered into the brain. So unfortunately on our models they don't mark the central sulcus, but we do need to know about it for the physiology part of the brain, and it's in the diagrams in your lab manual as well. Alright, so we're going to follow up with the second video now where we open this up and look inside at some of the structures that are internal and the internal parts of the brain.